Hey everyone, this is Jack Bourne, founder of Deadline Funnel. So, after you launch your course or product and you make the pivot to Evergreen so you can scale your business, it's really, really helpful to know what's working and what's not. Sounds pretty obvious, but if you don't know that, you're really flying blind and making guesses. And my next guest believes too many people are focusing on the wrong metric when it comes to paid ads. So, what number should you be focusing on? Well, that's what we're covering today in this training. My guest is the founder of a very successful Facebook ad agency called Shine and Succeed. So she knows the ins and outs of Facebook marketing and what works and what doesn't. She's been a guest on podcasts such as Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy and Rick Mulready's Art of Online Business, to just name a few. She also has her own podcast called The Shine Show, where she teaches listeners how to increase your reach, launch your online courses, and grow your business predictably and profitably so you can create more freedom and more wealth for you and your family. Please welcome Salome Schillack.
Hi, Jack. Thank you so much for having me here. I love your audience and I'm excited to share with them.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and dive in, because I know that a lot of my audience some of my audience are data geeks, but I would say most of them are not. Most of them are really coming more from the heart and firing from the hip, but they want the results that paid Facebook ads can generate for them. And they hear, you should be following this metric, you should be measuring opt-ins. So what do you say in terms of, what are you seeing for your clients when they switch from doing launches to going evergreen? What do they typically want to focus on versus what you think they should be focusing on?
Well, Jack, that's such a good question. And you know why I love that question is because when we start out, we need to just get stuff out there. We need to be firing from the hip. We need to be taking massive action and getting that webinar up and doing the thing and paying for the ads and just making sure that we get a result. And in the last 10 years, I want to say, we've gone from it being super simple super simple, but I mean, the equation was super simple. I put money into Facebook for a launch. I get money out on the other end of my launch. And so we call that return on ad spend, which is often abbreviated as ROAS. Some online course teachers also use the metric EPL, or earnings per lead, which is just another way of saying how much money you paid Facebook for leads, because Facebook is where we get people to opt in for our lead magnets or our launches. And then you got money out. So how much did you earn per person that you got as a lead? So that's very simple, right? That's literally a 1 + 1 = 2 equation. But there comes a time when we all get to the point where we're so exhausted from live launching. We are desperate to start getting to that 7-figure number. Maybe you've got a 6-figure funnel up and running. We're desperate to start turning it into a 7-figure thing so we can hire more team members and, start living the dream of drinking pina coladas by the beach while they do all the work, as we do, we business owners do. And that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. And that is also where, so the problem is that now we need to really start understanding our numbers and really start digging into our numbers. And this gets made even harder by the fact that we now have to deal with things like iOS changes, because iOS has just, unleashed a whole new level of complexity on us. So we have the problem that Facebook tracking is unreliable now. So we can't just look at Facebook and go, I put money in and then that money came out. It's not as simple as money in, money out anymore. We have more complex funnels now because we have to warm people up a little bit more. We have to keep them on our list. We are all building our lists in the hope that that list will then provide us with income when we do our live launch or when we run our evergreen funnels to those people. And then the other thing is, what we often forget is that we're working with people. We're not selling products. Yes, we're selling education, but it's not like e-commerce. An e-commerce store runs an ad to their product And within 48 to 72 hours, they've either made their money back or they haven't. And they know that stuff. We work with people, and people take time, and people need nurturing, and people warm up in different ways. You know, there's a saying that people need to see something 7 times before they're ready to buy. So if you think about someone being on your list and seeing your launch 7 times before they're ready to buy, those are the kind of things that we need to start paying attention to and looking into. And so I created a system that we call the most profitable customer journey. And it's a way that we analyze the data from a client's launch. Particularly, most of the time, it kind of comes in very handy at that point where they're going, I've live launched this a few times, it's making me money, and they bring us their return on ad spend. They can say, I put in $1, I get $6 out. So then they hand it over to us and they say, go make me more $6 for my $1 that I put in, right? And I go, whoa, it's not as easy as that. Let's just talk about this for a sec. So what we do then is we download all of their email lists of their sales, their purchases, along with all of the tags that are attached to those people. So let me just explain that. Inside your CRM, your email marketing program, so either ActiveCampaign or ClickFunnels, ConvertKit, those are your CRMs. You can download a list of all the people who bought your product. And what you want to do then is you want to ask yourself, what else did these people do? Did they download lead magnet number 1? Did they download lead magnet number 2? Did they download lead magnet number 3? Because chances are you probably spent money on list building at some point in your business. And now you want to know, did any of that money ever come back to me? Because maybe it came back a year later and you just don't know it, right? You also want to ask yourself, did they opt in for my webinar? Did they attend my challenge? Did they do both of those things? Did they do my webinar and my challenge? Or did they do my lead magnet and my webinar and my challenge? And that's what they needed to do before they bought. So what you want to know is you want to know where to put your money. You want to know how long it takes for people to become buyers of your courses. You want to make up for the loss of the traffic that you're losing due to the lack of data that we're getting directly from Facebook. And you want to start building a scalable, predictable funnel that you know when you're putting money into Facebook to bring people into your world, it's going to come back to you down the track, even if that takes 6 months for them or 3 months or 2 weeks or, all of that things, because otherwise you're just going to throw money at Facebook and you're not always going to understand why it didn't come back to you. So what we do is download the sales list, look at the tags, and what we ask ourselves is recency and frequency of other things that they did. So how recently did they do any of the things I've just mentioned? Download a lead magnet, attend a webinar, attend a challenge, and how frequently do they do that? Because if you look at recency, you start understanding how long it takes someone before they become a buyer. And so you can adjust your funnel accordingly. And if you look at frequency, you start seeing, oh, hang on, I've been putting all of my eggs into this webinar basket, but I can see that most of my buyers downloaded 2 lead magnets before they attended a webinar, and then they became buyers. So you can stop putting your money into the webinar, you start putting your money into the 2 lead magnets and move them to the webinar, and you end up with more buyers. That's a mouthful.
Yeah. So I'm following along and I'm just listening and taking all of this in. One of the questions that I think is still hanging out there for me that maybe you went over, but I just want you to sort of dive a little bit deeper on is what happens if someone, what are the negative things that happen in the current environment if someone is focusing too much on ROAS, return on ad spend?
One of the negative things that happen, the biggest negative thing that happens is when they focus too much on ROAS, they become blind to seeing where they're actually losing the conversions, if they are losing conversions. Because if you try to break it down to a simple money in, money out equation, and that's what you look at, and you're not happy with the result, how do you know where to fix it? Mm-hmm. A lot of the time, the first thing I hear people say is, I have a bad ads manager. That's the first thing I hear. And I go, no, not necessarily. What was the conversion rate on your webinar? And then they don't know. Or I would say, well, do you know how people are moving through your funnel? What are the conversion rates at every single point in your funnel? And they would say, I don't know. And so the first place they start looking for is either the Facebook ads didn't work, or the Facebook ads didn't bring in the right people. I hear that a lot as well. The Facebook ads didn't bring in the right people. Now, any ads manager worth their salt, and I'm sure, there's a lot of them out there that are not worth their salt, but anyone worth their salt would never put all their eggs in one basket. You'd have multiple interest audiences and multiple lookalike audiences. So the biggest issue with this is the business owner ends up being blind if they just simplify it to a money in, money out equation. And when you're a business owner, I know, because I'm the crazy creative who comes up with the new ideas all day, every day in my business too. I know that it can be hard to then, to sit down and go, okay, what's on the spreadsheet? What's the data telling us? I mean, I know it's torture. I'm very lucky that I have people in my business who can do that stuff, because it's not my favorite thing to do either. But it creates an intimacy with our numbers that as business owners allow us then to take responsibility and take ownership of what is working really well and what is not working really well, both in the traffic part of our funnel and in the conversion part of our funnel. So both where the Facebook Ads Manager is working and where our emails are getting delivered and we're doing our live webinars or we're doing our challenges. So holding on to that number keeps you blind, but paying attention to the most profitable customer journey and actually seeing how people move from the very first interaction they have with you all the way through to where they become a paying student or a paid coaching client. When you pay attention to that, then you're empowered, because now you can shift things and change things and play with things that aren't working, but also you can scale the things that are working, which is a great place to be, because that's how you get to $1 million.
So let me challenge you on something or just ask for clarification. And that would be, let's say I've been in business for some time and I've got several hundred, maybe several thousand clients that I could analyze. How many client records should we be going through before we start to see some sort of pattern that we can have some sort of sense of confidence in?
Well, the first question that I would be asking is it an evergreen funnel or is it a live launch funnel? If it's an evergreen funnel, then we would pull, let's say, the last 6 months of data and the last 12 months of data, and unpack the 6-month data, look for the patterns, and unpack the 12-month data and look for the patterns. Now, if this funnel has been consistently working well, the 6-month data and the 12-month data should kind of be the same, because if it's been predictable income, if it's been a profitable funnel, then we know we have a recipe that's working. So we know that people are moving through this journey in a profitable way. If it's a live launch, I would start by taking the last live launch data. And then the question is, did you do the same things in the previous launch or did you do something different? And if the client says, no, the last launch was a webinar launch, the one before that was a challenge launch, then we would do both separately and see if they paint a different picture. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So the next question I want to ask is, without revealing, obviously, who the client is, can you think of an example? Maybe you could share a short form story of a client of yours where the return on ad spend initially looked like bad news for the client. But then the further you went into the details, you realize, oh, wait a second, actually, if we make this modification, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I can. I have a good example, and it actually comes from my own business. So I have an online course that teaches new online course creators how to get started with Facebook ads. And we've live launched it 3 times now. And, the first couple were kind of, okay, let's see if this thing works. The third time we launched it, we were like, yes, this thing works. We know, we had a really profitable launch. We had a good return on ad spend. And so I said to the team, fabulous, let's evergreen this thing. I did exactly what my clients do that I tell them don't do, right? Exactly the same thing. So I went, this thing is working great. Let's evergreen this. And because I had launched this with a webinar and it was profitable, and I only, it's like where I'm from, we have an expression that the shoemaker's child's shoes are always broken. I think there's a better expression in English. I'm sure there's a better one, but it's like, my own business, I don't take my own advice always. And we did the webinar launch and it was very profitable and it worked. And I said to the team, let's evergreen this. And my team went, hold on. Let's do the most profitable customer journey work first. And so what we found when we looked at this, and I had been list building aggressively before the launch because 2 years ago, before COVID, I had no list. And I kind of got a bit anxious when COVID hit. I was like, oh, we need to build our email list because, if something happens in the agency, something happens to the agency, I want to have courses backing me up so that I'm not just reliant on clients for income. So what we did in this launch was we looked at the number of buyers that we had, and we identified that 71% of the buyers from that launch were warm. They did not come from cold webinar ads. Out of all those warm people, 72% had downloaded one specific lead magnet. So I was running ads to 2 lead magnets, 2 different ones. And I identified that 72% of the warm people had downloaded this one specific lead magnet. And then what we saw as well is 92% of the people who opted in for the webinar had also previously opted in for that lead magnet. So coming out of this, now that we're evergreening this, I have an evergreen system where I know my majority of my money, 80% of my ad budget is going into that lead magnet. And then I'm retargeting people who downloaded the lead magnet with a webinar. I will never spend another dollar on evergreen ads, live webinar ads, because even in a launch, it didn't work. And unless we had unpacked it this way, and I had spent the majority of my money, majority of my budget went to cold leads for the webinar. So looking at this, I go, oh, all that wasted money, they don't convert cold, they convert warm. But now I can build that evergreen funnel. The other interesting thing was we saw that the average time they were on my list before they became buyers were 50 days. So I know that I can run list building ads and then retarget everyone with either a pre-recorded or a live webinar every 50 days. And I have statistically set myself up to make a lot more money than I will have if I had just gone, great, let's whack this webinar on Evergreen.
That I'm really glad that I asked you that, because that's a really, really great example. Just to kind of recap, and please jump in if I have this wrong, but it sounds like if you had just looked at the money in the money out, then the money in for the launch, it was, you were happy with the results, but really there was no causal connection between I spent this amount on Facebook and then this amount came out during my launch. There really wasn't a connection. In fact, it sounds like most of your ad budget was kind of wasted in a way. And then you found out that, well, if we can still do the paid ads, but understanding the journey that people go on, how long it takes them to do the journey, and also what sort of important sort of waypoints we want them to go through on that journey, and then they're ready to go through that evergreen final, live, evergreen launch or evergreen funnel process is really helping you dial in so that you do have a positive, like money in, money out. But now there's that causal connection. Do I have that right?
You have that absolutely right. So if I had just looked at my return on ad spend from the launch, I would have gone, great. I put some dollars in, I got a lot of dollars out. But unless my team had stopped me and said, well, let's practice what we preach and look at the most profitable customer journey. Because my next step would have been to say, okay, let's record a webinar and run ads straight to the webinar. And do you have any idea how much money that would have cost me to then bang my head against that rock and notice, well, why is my webinar that worked so well when we live launched, why is it suddenly not working at all to a cold audience? And that's what so many people do.
That's really, 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 really insightful. So what would you say to someone who feels completely overwhelmed? Like it's one of those things, like sort of like going to the dentist, you need to do it, it's important for your health, but you're like, oh God, it's so painful, I don't want to do it. So for someone who's really Excel spreadsheet averse and they don't even know where to begin going through the numbers, like what would you recommend to someone like that?
I think you can hire someone who is more experienced in data unpacking and data and analytics. But I think you're still going to have to give that person, even if you hire someone else to work through the data, you're still going to have to tell them what is the question you want answered. So the question that you want answered is, out of all of these people who bought my paid product, what percentage of them also downloaded lead magnet 1, lead magnet 2, lead magnet 3? What percentage of them also opted in for what we call launch mechanism? So either a webinar or a challenge or a other thing, workshop or video series. And then you want to look for patterns. So you might see, out of all of the people who bought your course, if you have 3 lead magnets, one of them might have resulted in 70% sales. But it might also be the more expensive lead magnet, the one that ended up costing you $10 a lead. But the one that ended up costing you $1 a lead might only have resulted in 2% of sales. So then where are you going to put your money? You're going to put it into the more expensive lead magnet that actually brought you buying customers. And the same for the webinar. So then you're going to say, okay, so out of all of the buyers, what percentage of them were on the webinar? Do I need the webinar? What percentage of them bought without the webinar? So then you go, oh, if most people bought without the webinar, you don't even need the webinar, So that's the question you're going to ask. And so it's basically you're looking for, what did they do? How recently did they do it? And how frequently did they do it?
Yeah, so that brings up something interesting that I want to really focus in on, which is that even if you're tracking something else like cost per lead, that could lead you astray, because you might be saying, look, hey, ads manager, double down on the ones that are sending me leads for $1 versus lead for $10. Why would I want to spend $10 per lead when I can get them for $1 over here? But you just pointed out, it might be that, not necessarily, but it could be that the $10 leads are really where the buyers are coming from. in which case it's worth it. And then the other thing is just looking at just purely the conversion rate. You might have a landing page where the conversion rate is 20%, and over here it's 10%. I'm talking about for the lead, for the lead magnet. And you think, okay, shut down the one that has the lower opt-in rate, and that might actually lead your business astray, because that might be the one that actually, even though it's generating fewer leads, that's where all the buyers are actually coming from, and everything else over here is, for the most part, not generating clients. Do I have that right?
You have that absolutely spot on. And I'm so glad you've summarized it that way, because, I always think we took e-commerce marketing and we've applied that to online course marketing, because e-commerce marketing was older. It was an older form of marketing. And e-commerce says money in, money out. Cheapest lead, does it lead to a sale? Online course marketing has to be more sophisticated than that, because we're dealing with people, and the day of cheap leads are gone. We do not have that luxury anymore. So what we need to be paying attention to is paying customers, paying students. That's the only number that matters, is, did they end up being buyers? And then how did they get there? What was the journey they took to get to being a buyer? And that's a whole nother way of looking at your funnels, and then knowing where to put your money, where to actually put your money, where you're going to get the best result.
Well, that's really, really powerful. So, all right. I think that's a good place to end our main session. So I hope that you got a lot out of that. We have an advanced session with Salome, and in that advanced session, we're going to be covering a topic that I know is going to be really, really impactful. So I want to find out from Salome when we should be thinking about hiring an ads manager, and when you're considering an ads manager, what are some of the mistakes that you're likely to make that you definitely want to avoid? And what are some of the things that you should be looking for when you're hiring an ads manager? Because just like spending money with Facebook, spending money with a Facebook manager to run your Facebook ads also can be incredibly expensive if you don't know what you're doing and if you make a mistake, but it also can be incredibly beneficial if you make the right choice. So join us in the advanced session before the price goes up. I want you to click on one of the buttons that you see somewhere near this page that you're viewing right now. So in the advanced session, again, my goal is to get the secret sauce from Salome on exactly how to hire an ads manager and exactly when you should do that. So make sure that you lock in your special deal before it's too late. I don't want you to lose it to the deadline passing. Now, before we go, Salome, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell everyone how can they learn more about you, and also if you have any last final thoughts on the information that we just covered.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I have so many episodes on my podcast, The Shine Show, where I talk about this most profitable customer journey. So if you go to my website, shineandsucceed.com, and you go to the tab podcast, just scroll through there and, enjoy listening to me talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
Fantastic. All right. So we'll see everyone over in the advanced session.